Alright, welcome back everyone to part 3. Today we're going to be doing some renders with our perfume bottle here. So in part 1 we did the modeling, and in part 2 we did the shading. So now it's time to actually output some images of this thing. So I went ahead and made a little mood board of what I want to make. So the first image is going to be a render like this with some rocks and some sand. I thought, the bottle being like black, orange, and yellow made me think of the desert, and so I think I'm gonna go for something with a desert kind of vibe. And next shot is going to be one using only a backlight like this. I think that could look pretty cool with the colors on our glass and everything. And finally a close-up, so either something like this, focusing on the logo, or maybe something a bit more abstract like this one or this one. But the bottle is quite smooth, so I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get some really nice refractions like this. We'll see. Okay, so let's have a look at our first scene here. So I'm going to start with what's actually in the scene, so let's get rid of the lights and have a look at these rocks here. So I grabbed these from Quixel Bridge or Megascans. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You can look up tutorials on that on the internet. Just be aware that Bridge normally, when you export to Blender, gives you a material setup for cycles, but it doesn't work for Octane. So you're going to have to go into your folder and find where the files are downloaded, and then import them in and, make your material by hand, but it's pretty quick. Another thing for the displacement, I've noticed that the mid-level tends to be at 0.5 for most of the stuff on Quixel Bridge, but sometimes, like in this case, it's actually at 0, so watch out for that. And also, you need to go pretty insane on the height. Usually like 0.01 is pretty good for displacement maps, but yeah, for these, for some reason, you need to bump it way up, so just be aware of that. And make sure you bring in, sometimes it will give you a displacement file that's JPEG or PNG and an EXR, so make sure you use the EXR, otherwise it's not going to look good. So that's where I got the rocks, and I just kind of cut part of it off because I didn't like the shadows it was casting, and just arranged it so my bottle sat on it pretty well, and then just duplicated it to add another element to my scene with Alt-D, so they're linked copies. If you can see, yeah, they're like the same mesh, just duplicated, so that saves a bit on render time, I believe. And yeah, nothing too fancy here. For the sand, I did some like this, because when you have it flat, like you can see it go off into the background and it just clips off. It doesn't look great. So yeah, I just made this by grabbing the two edge loops at the end, and with proportional editing, you can like move them up like this to make a kind of a wave shape, and that works pretty well. As for the sand texture, I also got it on Quixel Bridge, and I just plugged in a transform value to everything to scale it way down until it looked right. So yeah, and using this technique, I also rotated it by 90 degrees, just so it looked better with the little waves. Alright, and for the background, it's just a plane with a material on it, just a base material, and a light pointed at it. I made sure to make this an ellipse because I wanted a kind of a round shape to my background light. And yeah, so let's move on to the lights. Actually, let's have a look at the camera real quick. Nothing special. It's 150 millimeters, which is pretty high, and there's no depth of field or anything. Don't really need it in this scene. So the lights, you can see I've got a bunch of them. I'm not using an HDRI in this scene because I wanted the more control over the shadowy areas. And yeah, when you use a HDRI, it tends to kind of fill in everything, and sometimes that doesn't look great. So I've got a ton of lights here, and I'm going to go through them and tell you what each one does. So in this scene, I used light passes a lot, or light passes. Yeah, light pass ID. So in Octane, you can, I believe it's now in cycles as well, but you can essentially tell a light, if I look at just one here, like this one. So this light is only affecting my rock on the left here and nothing else. And this is really useful when you want like really precise control over your lights. So let's have a look. Let's do the lights one by one. So I've got this one, which is just a very subtle kind of fill on the bottle on the left here. I've got this one on the right, which is affecting only the glass because I've got a separate one for the logo. So I wanted the logo to stand out more. And yeah, I used two different ones because, let me see. This one for the logo, it looked great on this upper part, but then on the glass, you could see the reflection if I actually do that right now. Yeah, you can see the reflection cuts off here, so I would need to make this bigger, but then it didn't look that good up here anymore. So I just did two different lights and try to line them up more or less so it kind of made sense still. Then I've got a rim light behind everything, just on the rocks and the sand here. I've got a rim light on the bottle itself. I've got another rim light on the rocks and the sand. So I've got one that's like really big and right behind them, and then one that's way smaller and kind of off to the side a little bit and gives this really cool effect. So next up I've got a bit of it's not quite a fill, but just to add some more light on the rock on the left here, and same thing for the rock on the right. It's very subtle, but it just takes these front faces out of complete darkness and gives them a bit more texture, so that's cool. And also one for the sand. So if I put everything back on for the environment, this is what it looks like. So we've got our rims giving us lighting on this flat part here and this part here, and a little bit on the back of the sand, and then our other lights are just here to add a little bit more light to these areas in the shadow here, and yeah, give it a bit more depth. So this is what everything looks like all together. Now you do want to be kind of careful, because when you use this technique and you go this far, like pretty much every object has its own light. If you place them at very like different angles, it can start to look a bit unrealistic, right? Which makes sense. Say if my bottle only had a light from the front right, and then the rest of my scene had a light from the back left, that doesn't really happen in real life. So it can start to look a bit weird. But yeah, I think it's if you do it right, it's very useful to use light linking like this. So if you want, I didn't explain how to actually do it. You just come here in your light nodes, in your emission, black body or texture emission, there's going to be a light pass ID, and then you select your object, and you can disable whichever IDs you want. Now you can select multiple objects at once, and if you press Alt and click on these here, it's going to update all of them at the same time. Alright, and final thing I didn't mention, I've got some gobos going on my lights. It's just a gradient, like a circular gradient, just so we don't have these sharp edges like this. And yeah, you just take a RGB image, plug it into distribution, give it a projection XYZ to UVW, object space, and yeah, that's how we did that. Whenever you're lighting reflective surfaces like glass or glossy plastic, you pretty much have to do this. Unfortunately, in Octane, there's no like default way to make the edges of your light softer, so you have no choice but to use a gobo. Alright, and I think that sums it up for the scene. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's have a look at our second render here. So for this one, yeah, I just wanted the only light to be a backlight, so to have the silhouette of the bottles. So yeah, I mean, this one's really simple. Let's see here. So I've got my bottle that I duplicated, just kind of rotate it around to make it a bit more interesting. Again, I'm not using an HDRI here. In fact, I'm not even using a background. I just got the visible environment plugged in here. And if you want to use this, it's really useful because you can set it to a solid color. Just make sure backplate is ticked on. And also, I have my vignetting set all the way up. It's maybe a little bit too much. Might want to bring it down a bit. But yeah, I think this looks kind of flat and boring. But when you add in the vignetting, it's looks a lot better. So it's probably fine like this actually. Maybe 0.8 or 0.9. And as for the lighting, only one light, super simple, really big ellipse here. I just played with the placement and the sizing until I got something that looked pretty cool. It's maybe a little bit too strong actually. Might want to move it back a bit. But yeah, I'm also using a gobo here, because if I don't, you can see this what it looks like. Not good. To get that nice soft lighting. And that's pretty much it for this one. Again, super simple, but I think it really looks pretty cool with the silhouettes and just the orange coming through. So yeah, pretty nice. And let's have a look at our last one. Alright, and here's our last one. So I tried doing a close-up on the logo, but it just didn't look that great. I went with something a bit more abstract, with these nice flowy shapes here. I think it just looks really cool, and you can get so many iterations of it pretty easily. So yeah, I deleted all the parts of the perfume I didn't need, just kept the glass and the liquid. So as for the lights, this is the first one where I am using an HDRI to get those really cool reflections. Now you do want to make sure you use an HDRI that has, I'd say, lots of small shapes kind of separated, right? You don't want like a studio HDRI where you have one big backdrop of light. So you want lots of small shapes, and you want them to be quite smoothed out. Otherwise, you're going to get pretty harsh reflections on your glass. So yeah, I'm using one from Grayscale Gorilla Premium. I think it's called Premium. That I got with the Octane Black Friday bundle. But you can make it yourself pretty easily. Just go to Photoshop and make a bunch of circles and ellipses, and then blur them out. And yeah. So that's giving me my main kind of lighting and reflections on here. And as for the lights, I've got one, let's have a look here, just to the side here to fill it in a bit more. And the other one is coming from underneath to kind of make the bottle stand out from the background a little bit more. And for this one, I turned down the temperature to 3500. Otherwise, at base it was way too white, and yeah, I just thought it looked better like this. So yeah, that is my render. And this setup is really cool because I think it's pretty easy to get really interesting shapes just by, you can move the camera around. If I move it from the 3D cursor and just double tap R, then move it around, you can see the way the light interacts with the reflections. It's really cool. And I can also select my glass and liquid here, just move those around. So yeah, you can get really interesting kind of abstract shapes and stuff like that. So yeah, that was the third render. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or anything, drop a comment. And I will be back hopefully soon with more tutorials. I think more modeling stuff, maybe, because as for like rendering and making my scenes, I'm trying to switch over to Houdini and maybe Redshift. And yeah, I'm not good enough to make tutorials on that yet, but yeah, I'll try to keep putting out Blender stuff for you guys, and let me know if there's anything you want to see. Alright, thanks again for watching, and see you next time. Bye.